So everybody always asks me how I came to the conclusion that all these cases were linked. And to be honest with you, at first I wasn't really looking. I was having conversations, just, talking to the family, seeing, what Renee was like, where she was about. When the conversation came in, I find it odd that Nathan was a part of Janice's search party. And I said, okay, that's odd. And they said, and another aunt said to me, well, I had a dream about Janice when she went missing, and people were searching. She said I had a dream about, somebody burying her, and the person had light brown khaki pants on and a red and black flannel. I said, okay. The next thing it was, well, what about Lisa? Do you know that we lived on Regan Road and Nathan was obsessed with Lisa? For some reason, he would watch her play. Now, Nathan loved little girls. Everybody knows Nathan loved little girls. But it was said that he would watch Lisa from the window or from behind the house. One day, my Aunt Debbie's dog was hit by a car. Lisa brought the dog over and told Debbie that, her dog was just hit. Well, apparently, my Aunt Debbie says Nathan was basically foaming at the mouth, that Lisa was there. And, it was a few years prior to Lisa disappearing, but that story kind of sticks in your head because you're like, well, what are they trying to tell me? You know what I mean? Like, so no matter where I turned, everything was, and then it was said that apparently one of the uncles knew, and I thought it was sister, but it was cousin, one of the cousins to Deborah Spickler. It was said that, Nathan was one of those guys that just kind of drove around and, spent most of his days just kind of driving around, looking at girls, probably waiting for opportunity. Whatchamacallit. So I didn't technically put these cases together, but everybody else around me was trying to put them together. And then when I went in to go look and I started asking more questions, I had asked, there was a picture in the newspaper and it said a man in questioning for a different case. I believe it was the Patricia Luce case. And so I went to the family and I said, who can I ask about this one? So I showed a couple family members. They were like, no. And I said, well, my father's a mechanic. I'll ask my father. So I showed him the car first and he said, oh, I know that car. And I said, oh, you do? And he goes, yeah, let me think of the name. And he wasn't coming up with it fast enough, so I showed him the face. And he came out with a name. He said, yeah, his name is Bobby. The last time I seen him, he lived in West Springfield, Massachusetts. We had a small conversation. It was just about 10 years ago. He's like, but I know who that is. And I was like, okay. It's kind of weird that, the next person I went and asked, there was another newspaper article, and it was for Janice Pocket. And it was a man in questioning for that. And I went to a family member of Sue's and I said, do you know who this is? And I said, is this Barry? And they said, no, it's Barry's brother, Billy. And I said, okay. But they, I know from having a sketch artist, they could be sometimes wrong. I went to my father again and he said, well, that sounds like the family car. He's like, but he said, but the description, I don't know. And I said, okay. I went to the police with all of that. I handed them all of that. Fast forward a little bit, somebody had contacted me and asked me if they could, help. They were very interested in these cases and they wanted to help. I said, okay. He came, I talked to him, I gave him all the information I could possibly have on Nathan, on Bob, on Barry. I let him know that I had spoken to Barry. I also let him know that Mike Bouchard had spoken to Barry. And this was the information we got. They then decided that they were going to take cadaver dogs out, and which is fine. So I get a text message stating, oh, they didn't really find much, but there was 22 spots of interest over off of the land. And I was like, what? And he says, and then one dog jumped in the water and drank the water, but then jumped back out. And I said, okay, I don't understand all of this. So because it was played off so nonchalantly, I decided that I was going to call the dog handler. And I did. And the dog handler said to me that he, was personally there at the case, and that it could have been years ago they had found a mattress with blood on it, so the dog hit on that. He said the problem was that both dogs didn't hit on it, which is fine. It was said that there must be a cemetery up the hill, and the water was trickling down from that. The two cemeteries in town are actually down the hill from that and a little bit to the left. But, okay, I said, what about the well that the dog jumped in? Well, supposedly it's the same well that the 2 bags and the bloody tarp was taken out of in 2016, in 17, because there was 2. And it was the same well. I said, well, isn't that odd? Why did the dog jump in? And, why would he drink the water? Because when I looked it up, dogs don't do that. If there's nothing there, from what my understanding is those bags have something on it, and the bag got taken out, so the dog had a little bit of a scent, but he didn't have anything else to go on. But anyways, that report was held because there was a podcast coming out, and they didn't want to ruin the podcast. So they waited. They waited to hand over the evidence to the police. They waited for the podcast to come out. And then they decided to say, oh, there was nothing there. Now, I was allowed to go on to the property. I had messaged the podcast person, asked them if I could go and take some pictures and, see what they see, because I was not allowed to be there when the dogs came out. It was during the coronavirus. One of the family members was able to be there, and I'm grateful that he allowed her to be there. But I wasn't allowed to be there. So I went up after the fact and I took some pictures, and I seen little stakes, little red stakes everywhere, all 22 of them, and it was all scattered around an area near what used to be another well. So there was a well on the bottom, and then there's a well up top, and that well, from wear and tear after time, just kind of collapsed on itself. But how strange is that there's another well there? So the people that own the property decided that they didn't want people on the property anymore, and decided to say that there's nothing there. They took down the stakes. They decided that I wasn't allowed there anymore, even though I had permission and been working with them, just questioning just like everybody else is. I didn't really think that if things were there, they would have been right there. But what do I know? What do I know? But if there's spots of interest coming up, and these dogs are hidden on something, and you felt enough to peg it, why would you take those down? Why would you take them down before the cops or the police, whatever, could see the stakes in the ground to see where those dogs hit? Now, the state police turned around and said, well, we brought our own dogs out there. And nothing hit on both sides. Now, for both police and podcast, I said, did you take it by the La Rosa house? I said, where that used to sit. And both times I got, we don't know where that is. Okay. The podcast guy said, I he came out with another podcast saying that he took ground penetrating radar to the ground. From what I'm told, I can't go up to the property or else I'll go to jail. But apparently the family that owns the land across the street and the podcast guy went to the land near the memorial and they decided to ground penetrate in radar. They said they didn't find anything. I'm not quite sure how many, square footage they actually did. Very suspenseful in the podcast, whether, we think we found something. But anyways, that was all just a hoax, and that was all just for show, apparently, because nothing came of it. The family decided that they were no longer going to help the situation, regardless whether the girls are there or not. They don't want any part of it, which fine. The land just kind of sits there. Nobody's really doing anything with it. The police are saying that, if they were in a well, the water would have pushed them out by now. Like they would have, it would have collapsed on top of each other. We don't know that. We don't know what's on that land. I find it strange that there's only 4 that's never been found. Now everybody else was kind of, almost in places where they needed to be found. Like they were purposely found. Sue was purposely found. Sue's body was, and even if like the podcast guy said that he believes that these girls are where Sue was found. Why? And then he said he took the cadaver dogs out there. And it was a windy day, but the only place that they hit was Sue's area. So did you dig? Did you look for anything else? I mean, what if, you know what I mean? Like, what if it was a mass grave? Did you hand that over to the police department? No. Oh, okay. Did you go off into the woods by, I-84 there and search the long way down? No? Okay. Did you search? I have many a place. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't. He cherry picked what he wanted to do, and he put it out there, and he said, "I solved these cases." Just like there was a YouTube thing, My Psychic Life, that said, oh, I have it. I know exactly what happened. Do ya? Because if you did, you know what I mean? Do you think you could give an exact location? Because the only person that gave exact location right now is Barry. We've never heard of an exact location, but we got one. So, and we're not searching. We're not searching that whole area. There's marshy area up to the side over here. By Elm Street, it's all mush and mosh, and I'm sure nobody's ever really been in there. You go up a little bit and it gets drier. You had all those old cottages, all the old wells within there. Why not search it? For the first time, you actually have like more of a location of where they could possibly be. The odds of 4 people just vanishing, never to be seen again, and not being in the same place, okay. But then there's other reports. I just listened to another podcast the other day, and the guy was very factual. He was sitting on his computer, and he went through all the facts. And a woman happened to call in, and she happened to say in the 1970s, 1971 to be exact, in Vernon Circle, she was abducted. Now there's a trailer park behind that area, and the guy had brought her out the back door of the store and was looking to rape her. She gave a description of the guy, and she said black and red flannel. Okay, so that caught my attention. She said the guy was unable to do anything because of the fact that somebody was walking from the mobile home to the back of the store. She said the store was just being built back then. There was nothing really there. Nobody was really working. But the complex itself, like the big buildings that are there now, weren't there. Weren't there. They were making a shopping mall. But she did give it a description. And then in the 70s, later 70s, there was quite a few girls that were down by 7-Eleven in Vernon. Now, all but two probably crossed the path of 7-Eleven. You have Janice that didn't, and you have Irene, which we have no clue. But when my cousin Maurice was told about his mother, he assumed that she walked down to the 7-Eleven. Now, I found that strange because she walked behind the house towards the pharmacy. But Mo said, no, I thought she walked down to the 7-Eleven. So Sue does have a little connection to the 7-Eleven. Some of the other girls went missing from there. You have to look behind the 7-Eleven. You have to look where Sue was found. Just take the dogs out. It's beautiful outside. Like, what is the harm? If these guys do it nonprofit, what's the harm in calling and saying, hey, can you run the dogs? Like, how many police officers have to get paid to go out there to run a dog? If they find something, great, we'll call you. But if not, then, you know what I mean? Like, so be it. So the dogs went out there, they looked. So why not check? There's a wooded area behind the 7-Eleven. Check it. There is, the wooded area where Sue was found. Check it. That's a lot of land, but why not? They dug up one of the lakes, or they drained one of the lakes, I think 3 of them in that area, for Janice. So did you ever take the dogs out to the area, especially after Sue was found? Maybe. I don't believe so. I believe that they're on the land of Wendell and Pine. But that's just my belief. And then you also have, the 7-Eleven where Sue was, and where Renee disappeared from, and where, the dogs hit 22 spots of interest. What is the odds of that? Like, what is that? Why wouldn't you want to look more? Why wouldn't you want to help more? And then if the if the well is so deep, I guess the dogs can't. But why not stick probes in the ground and see how far it goes? See if there is an opening somewhere or something, you know what I mean? We can do that. Like, those shouldn't be huge, big deals. Now, my problem with the Renee case is, the family didn't report her missing, so we have a lot of time that, just is gone. But with that, like, why not? I don't know. I guess I'm just getting caught up, because why not just search, like, that area, and, they don't add her to anything. They didn't talk to any family members except for me and my father. The only reason Mo was talked to is because, I brought Mo into it. But they didn't, they ended up talking to Barry. But he just claimed that, he didn't know anything. He knew nothing. He didn't even hang out with Bob, which is a lie. He hung out with Bob from like 1972. Excuse me.